I stood outside the restaurant, staring at the bright neon lights reflecting off the streets, feeling a mixture of pride and uncertainty. This was it, Aurum, the restaurant I had sacrificed everything for. Los Angeles shimmered before me, its towering buildings casting long shadows over the bustling city below. The night felt alive, buzzing with excitement, but for some reason, I felt empty. This was supposed to be the moment I'd dreamed of for years. This was the culmination of every long hour, every risk, every tear. Yet, as the city sparkled around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Aurum wasn't just a restaurant. It was the dream I had spent my whole life chasing, the one that everyone in my family told me was a waste of time. They didn't believe in me. They never did. My parents always had a different idea of success, one that involved numbers, power, and wealth, things they didn't see in cooking. But to me, cooking was everything. It was my art, my language, my way of telling stories. I had worked in kitchens across the country, building my reputation, proving that I belonged in a world that saw chefs as nothing more than workers, not creators. But still, no matter how much I achieved, to my family, I was just the dreamer, the one who had chosen the wrong path. I remembered the early days when cooking wasn't about fame or Michelin stars. It was about the love of food, the love my grandmother had shown me when she taught me how to cook in our small kitchen at home. I was just a little girl then, kneading dough with her, listening to her stories about distant lands and their cuisines. Those were the moments that shaped who I was, but those moments felt like they belonged to a different world now. A world where I was the only one who believed in me, and I was about to prove to myself and everyone else that I could make it, with or without their support. As I stood there in front of my restaurant, the invitation to my family still sat unanswered in my phone. I had begged them to come, asked them to be there for me on the most important day of my life. But the truth was, even though I had dreamed of this day for so long, a part of me had already accepted that they might not come. That maybe, I had been chasing a dream that only I could see. But I was ready. Tonight was about me, about Aurum, and about making something that could never be taken away. Whether they showed up or not, tonight would be my night. The night I had earned. The excitement in the air was thick, almost electric, as I walked through the kitchen of Aurum, making sure every detail was perfect. The staff moved with purpose, like a well-rehearsed dance, each person knowing exactly where they needed to be. The smell of fresh ingredients filled the air, the soft hum of the kitchen's heat and bustle almost soothing. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore, it was a piece of me, everything I had poured into it, every ounce of energy, every sacrifice. I could feel it in my bones. Tonight was not just a dream coming true. It was my soul on display for the world to see. But even as I stood there in the heart of it all, I couldn't ignore the tight knot in my chest, the heavy thought that kept creeping in, the question of whether anyone would show up. Would they? The preparations were meticulous. From the perfect arrangement of tables to the handcrafted menu that spoke volumes of my journey, Aurum wasn't just a restaurant, it was a story. It was my story. I had poured everything I had, my savings, my energy, my time, into this place. I even mortgaged my apartment to make sure I had enough to get everything right. This was a gamble. It was a risk bigger than anything I had ever taken, but there was no turning back now. I moved through the kitchen, checking in with my sous chef Maria, who was slicing through the fresh seafood like she had been born to do this. James, the sommelier, was carefully organizing the French wines that would complement the dishes perfectly. Everyone seemed so in sync, so sure of what they were doing. It was almost too easy to believe that everything would go smoothly, but in the pit of my stomach, doubt lingered. I looked at the clock, just a few more hours until the doors would open. I couldn't afford for anything to go wrong. The guest list for tonight was a who's who of the city's elite, food critics, celebrities, business moguls. They all had high expectations, but I knew that Aurum was ready. It was everything I had dreamed of, and more. But even with all the preparations, even with the kitchen running like clockwork, something still felt off. I had invited my family, but there was no reply. Not even a simple text. I had poured my heart into this, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this time, they would see me for what I was, someone who had earned their place in this world, not just someone chasing a fleeting dream. But as the hours ticked down and the restaurant came alive with the hum of excitement, I couldn't help but wonder if they would come. Or if, as usual, they'd just be watching from the sidelines, too proud to admit that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. Either way, tonight was going to be the most important night of my life, with or without them. The clock struck 6 p.m., and the doors of Orem swung open. The night had finally arrived. Luxury cars lined the street, and the flashes of cameras from the press and socialites lit up the area. This was it, the moment I had dreamed of for years. My heart raced as I stood by the door, greeting each guest with a smile that barely masked the storm brewing inside me. I should have felt nothing but pride, but instead, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that gnawed at me with every passing second. The city was alive with celebration, but all I could hear was the silence in my phone. Not a single message. Not a single call. No one from my family had shown up. The guests were pouring in, and the atmosphere was electric. Critics, food lovers, and high society had all gathered to witness what I had worked my whole life to create. They all looked at me with admiration, some even with awe, praising the ambience and the food before they had even taken their first bites. The menu was a reflection of who I was, a mix of tradition and bold new flavors, dishes that carried the weight of my story, my journey. Yet as the praise filled the air, the one thing I wanted more than anything, the one thing I had been desperately hoping for, was nowhere to be found. My family wasn't there. They hadn't shown up. I tried to push the thought away, focusing on the tasks at hand, on the guests who were now savoring my food, who were now saying the things I had always hoped to hear. The risotto was a hit, my signature dish. The critics were jotting down notes, the sommelier was proudly showing off the finest wines, and everything seemed perfect on the outside. But inside, I was broken. It wasn't just the disappointment of their absence. It was the crushing realization that they had never truly believed in me. All these years of hard work, of sacrifice, of striving to prove that I could do something extraordinary, and they couldn't even bother to show up. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. Tonight wasn't about them. It wasn't about their approval. It was about me, about the journey I had taken, about the people who believed in me and stood by me. And yet, as the night wore on and the restaurant buzzed with energy, a part of me couldn't help but ache for the recognition I had so longed to receive from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But even as the critics sang my praises, even as the restaurant filled with compliments, I couldn't help but wonder if they were truly the only ones who mattered. Would they regret it? Would they realize that they had missed out on something far bigger than just a night out? Or would they continue to stay blind to the truth of who I had become? The evening dragged on, and despite the glowing reviews and the buzz around the restaurant, I couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible. Every now and then, I found myself glancing at my phone, hoping, praying that maybe, just maybe, one of them would reach out. But there was nothing. No message, no call. Just the constant reminder that, once again, they weren't there when I needed them most. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to know, why hadn't they shown up? So, I dialed Liam's number first, my brother, the one who always seemed to have it all figured out. The phone rang, and when he finally picked up, I could hear the impatience in his voice. "What is it?" he snapped. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't hide the hurt. "Liam, you didn't come," I said quietly, almost more to myself than to him. "It's the opening of my restaurant." There was a brief pause, then a chuckle on the other end. "I'm at a VIP event with a client. You really thought I'd skip that for your little restaurant?" His words hit harder than I expected. I knew he didn't care, but hearing it so clearly, so coldly, made it worse. "Liam," I said, trying to steady my breath, "this isn't just a restaurant. It's my dream." But he wasn't listening. "Your dream doesn't make me money," he scoffed, cutting me off. "Look, enjoy your night, but don't expect us to care." The line went dead, and I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. My brother, the one I thought might at least show some understanding, had proven what I already knew: he would never see me for who I truly was. I wiped away the sudden sting in my eyes, but the anger and disappointment bubbled up too quickly. I didn't want to let it get to me, but I couldn't stop myself. I called my mother next, hoping maybe she would offer something different, something that made me feel like I wasn't alone. When she answered, I could hear the soft sounds of music and chatter in the background. She was at a party, Probably another event where her designer friends were showing off their latest fashions. "Mom, it's the grand opening tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Did you forget?" Her response was casual, almost dismissive. "Oh right, I forgot. But anyway, I'm at this fashion event, you know how packed my schedule is." The words felt like a slap. She hadn't even bothered to remember. "A simple congratulations would have been enough," I said, my voice tight. There was a long pause on the other end, then she sighed. "Sienna, don't be so sensitive. Real success isn't some little restaurant. If you want to do something meaningful, think about investment, finance. Don't make a fuss over something so trivial." My throat tightened. I fought back the tears, but they still came. "This isn't trivial, Mom. This is my life." She didn't understand. She never had. "I don't have time for this," she said flatly, hanging up before I could say anything else. And just like that, the conversation was over. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what I had built. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But it felt like the world was closing in on me. My family had always been this way, dismissive, uninterested, unable to see the things that mattered to me. They never believed in me. They never cared about my dreams. And tonight, as I stood in the midst of my greatest accomplishment, they were still nowhere to be found. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit, but as the tears began to burn in my eyes, I knew that I wasn't waiting for them anymore. This was my success, and it was never going to be defined by their approval. I wiped my face and put my phone down. No more calls. No more hoping. It was time to focus on the people who mattered, the ones who believed in me, the ones who were here tonight, watching me succeed. I stood in the kitchen, my hands moving automatically, preparing each dish with the precision and care I had spent years perfecting. But inside, a fire was burning. I wasn't just cooking to impress critics or celebrities. I was cooking to prove something to myself. Despite everything, despite them, this night was a success. My risotto, my signature dish, was being served to the city's elite, and I could feel the energy shift. Each bite brought compliments. Each person who took a taste could see the passion I had poured into every plate. And though it wasn't the applause I had hoped for from my family, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the validation I had been chasing my whole life, not from them, but from the people who truly appreciated the art I had created. As the evening continued, the praise didn't stop. People were in awe of the food, the ambience, the feeling of the place. The critics who had once been skeptical were now writing glowing reviews, their pens moving faster as they jotted down their notes, impressed with everything I had built. I could hear them murmuring to each other, talking about the flavors, the creativity, the seamless experience they were having. And then, there was Michelle Parker, the most renowned food critic in Los Angeles. Her words held weight, and her approval meant everything. When she said, "This is more than a meal, it's an experience," I knew I had done it. This was my moment, and no one could take it away from me. Not my family, not anyone. But as I stood there, receiving the admiration I had longed for, a part of me couldn't help but ache. Not for the praise, but for the absence of the people I had hoped would be there. They had never believed in me, and now they would have to face the reality of my success without them. The emptiness was still there, but it wasn't the same. It was a reminder that I had moved beyond their judgment. It was a sign that, finally, I was standing tall on my own. I had built something real, something that couldn't be taken away by their doubts or their dismissive comments. They had missed the chance to be part of it, and now, all I could do was focus on the future that was already unfolding before me, with or without them. The night wasn't over, but in many ways, I had already won. It wasn't long after the night ended that the calls started coming in. At first, it was just a text from Liam, short, cold, and empty. He wanted a reservation at Orem for one of his VIP clients. Of course, it wasn't about him being proud of me, or even trying to reconnect. It was just about getting a seat at the table of success he had ignored for so long. I almost laughed. After everything, this was the best they could do. I stared at the message for a moment, unsure whether to respond or simply let it sit there, a glaring reminder of how far apart we had grown. But I didn't need to answer. I already knew what I needed to do. They hadn't been there for me when it mattered, so why should I suddenly bend over backward for them now? Then came my mother. Her message was different from Liam's. It wasn't about business or deals. She was acknowledging the restaurant's success, almost reluctantly. She said she'd seen the media coverage, heard the praise, and that she was proud, though the word felt hollow coming from her. But what hurt most wasn't her words, it was the timing. The months of silence, the cold dismissals, and only now, when things were undeniable, did she decide to show up. She wasn't asking to share in my joy, she was merely recognizing my success because now it mattered to her. But I wasn't sure I could forgive her for waiting until it was too late. The final message came from my father. It was almost identical to my mother's, and even colder. A simple note of congratulations, paired with a suggestion that we should catch up sometime. But it wasn't about catching up. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them. It was about them seeing me as more than just the dreamer, more than just the failure they had always labeled me. I stared at the phone, my mind racing, but this time I didn't feel the hurt I thought I would. Instead, I just felt nothing. They reached out, but their attempts at reconciliation felt shallow. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about love. It was about them finally recognizing my worth, but only after they saw that I had become something they couldn't ignore anymore. They didn't call because they missed me, or because they wanted to be part of my success. They called because they needed something from me now. They needed to be seen with the person who had finally made it. But that was not why I had worked so hard. And that was not why I had built Orem. I had done it for me, for the belief I had in myself, and for the people who had stood by me from the beginning. The family I had built wasn't the one who walked away from me in the beginning. It was the one I had found in the people who truly believed in what I was doing, long before the critics came calling. So, as the messages kept coming in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. They had missed their chance. And while I couldn't forget the pain of being left behind, I had already moved on. Orem was thriving, and I was no longer waiting for validation from the people who had never truly supported me. In the end, their regret didn't matter as much as they thought it would. I had succeeded not for them, but despite them. And that was all the satisfaction I needed. I stood there, looking out over the kitchen, watching the team work in perfect harmony. The hustle and bustle of the night felt so familiar, but this time, something was different. It wasn't the buzz of the critics or the endless reservations. It wasn't the awards or the articles that had been written about Orem. It was the quiet moment of realization that washed over me. I had done it. Not just for the restaurant, not just for the fame or the recognition, but for me. I had created something real, something I could be proud of, not because others had believed in me, but because I had believed in myself when no one else did. As I moved through the kitchen, checking on each dish, there was no weight on my shoulders anymore. No fear of not being enough. No longing for validation from a family that had never truly understood what I was trying to do. There was only peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt at ease. The long nights, the countless sacrifices, the doubts and rejections, they were all behind me now. I had faced them all, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Orem wasn't just a reflection of my culinary skills. It was a testament to my resilience, to the strength I had found in myself when I had nothing but my dream to hold on to. It didn't matter that my family hadn't come. It didn't matter that they were only now reaching out because they saw what I had become. What mattered was that I had built something that couldn't be taken away. My success wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving that I was right to trust myself, to follow my heart, and to never give up on what I believed in. And in that moment, as I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by a team who believed in me and a restaurant that was thriving, I realized that I no longer needed anyone's approval. I had found peace in my own journey, in my own success, and in the understanding that I was enough, just as I was. The rest, the recognition, the success, it would come and go, but the belief in myself was the one thing that would always remain. The quiet hum of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, and the chatter of satisfied customers, it all felt so normal now. Orem had become a symbol of everything I had worked for, but it wasn't just about the success or the fame. It was about the journey, the lessons learned, and the strength I had found within myself. Looking out over the room, I couldn't help but smile. I had done this. I had created something from nothing, not because anyone told me I could, but because I refused to let anyone tell me I couldn't. Over the months, as the reservations piled up and the accolades poured in, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about proving my family wrong anymore. It wasn't about showing them I could make it. It was about something much deeper, a commitment to myself, to my dream, and to the belief that anything was possible if you were willing to fight for it. My family may have missed the grand opening, may have only come around when they saw the success, but that didn't change what I had built. I had built a legacy. Not a legacy based on others' expectations or approval, but one built on my own determination, my own passion, and my own hands. Aurum wasn't just a restaurant, it was proof that you could rise above, that you could make your dreams a reality, even if no one believed in you at first. Looking back, I knew that the struggles, the heartache, and the moments of doubt had all been part of what made this journey worth it. It had all led me to this place, where I didn't need validation from anyone. The world might have come to see me, to praise me, but I had found something even more valuable than that, my own peace. I wasn't doing this for the fame, the Michelin stars, or the recognition. I was doing it because it was my passion, my dream. And that was enough. The story of Aurum was just beginning, and I knew that the real success wasn't about how many people walked through the doors or how many stars I received. It was about the belief that no matter where you start, no matter how many people doubt you, you can build something that lasts. Something meaningful. And that's the legacy I would leave behind. One built on believing in yourself and never giving up.